You're sitting in silence, not just the absence of sound, but the kind of silence that presses in, thick and suffocating. There are no voices, no music, no hum of a city, not even a crackling fire, just your breath and the dark. You're alone, maybe for days, maybe weeks. And in this moment, something stirs inside you, not hunger, not fear, but something more ancient. A hum, a rhythm. You start to sing, not because you want to, but because if you don't, something inside you might break. Now imagine that this isn't a moment of loneliness in your apartment, but your life in an ice age wasteland, cut off by snow, predators, and darkness that lasts for months. You're a hominin trying to survive not just cold or hunger, but isolation. And singing may be your only weapon. But what were you really singing? And why did it matter more than fire? You're born into a world of soft sounds, a rustle of fur against skin, the faint crackle of fire, a breath near your ear. These are your first lullabies, not sung but felt. You don't know words, you don't need them. What you understand is presence, the nearness of others, their warmth, their rhythm. That's your first language. But even now, before your first memory forms, you already carry something ancient in your bones, a terror older than fear itself. It lies dormant just under the skin like frostbite waiting to bloom. You don't know it by name, but your body does. You've inherited it. Loneliness. Not the kind you feel when a friend forgets your birthday. Not even the kind you feel in a crowded room. This loneliness is deeper, heavier, physical. You are wired to survive hunger, cold, predators. But you are not built to survive being cut off from others. Not for long. Because in your world, separation is not a nuisance. It is a death sentence. You wouldn't have made it through your first night alone. Even now, as an infant, your brain lights up in panic when you're out of sight of your tribe. You scream, not because you're dramatic, but because, in your evolutionary script, disappearing from the group means you've already been left behind. Eaten. Forgotten. But you're not alone yet. Not yet. You grow up learning how to stay close, how to read faces, how to mimic sounds. You play games that train your instincts, follow the voice, stay in rhythm, stay connected. You hum without knowing why. You echo sounds back as if your life depends on it. Because it does. Your tribe is small. Maybe 15, maybe 20. Faces you know as well as your own breath. There are no cities, no strangers, no crowds. When one of them goes missing, you don't just lose a person. You lose a part of your world. And one day, the silence comes for you. Maybe it's a storm, maybe a broken ankle, maybe a wrong turn that leaves you alone in the snow. But now it's just you and the wind. At first you listen. You strain to hear anything, any voice, any footstep, any familiar sound that might tether you back. But there's nothing. Just the static howl of cold air rushing over stone. Time distorts. Your body stays still, but your mind runs, loops, trembles. You call out once, then again. No answer. And suddenly the silence isn't quiet anymore. It's loud, crushing. It pushes against your chest. You start to sing, barely a whisper, just a low rhythmic sound. You don't know where the song came from, but it comes anyway. Modern scientists might call it vocal self-stimulation, a way to soothe the nervous system. But you don't know that. All you know is that singing makes the silence less alive. Because the silence begins to feel like something is there, something watching, waiting, something you cannot name. In the modern world, we call this the social brain. An ancient network of neurons evolved not for survival alone, but for survival together. Your ancestors weren't the strongest or the fastest, but they were synchronized. Group living required minds that could read faces, mirror emotions, synchronize breathing. And so your brain evolved not just to tolerate others, but to need them. Your baseline for safety was never aloneness, it was proximity. Which is why, when you are alone for too long, strange things start to happen. You begin to hear voices that aren't there, footsteps, breathing. Sometimes you see flickers at the edge of your vision, but you're not broken, you're not hallucinating out of madness. Your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do: simulate others, create company from absence. Because for your ancient body, the absence of others is more dangerous than illusion. Modern science confirms it. Sensory deprivation studies show that when people are cut off from sound, social cues, or feedback for too long, they unravel. Sleep breaks down. Memory distorts. The mind invents patterns, rhythms, sometimes entire characters, just to survive the void. But you didn't have journals or therapy or rescue helicopters. You had one tool, one instinct. You made sound, not to attract predators, not to map the terrain, but to hold on to yourself. You hum, you chant, you repeat patterns, reassuring yourself that you still exist, that there is still a center, still a heartbeat, even if it's only yours. Somewhere in your evolutionary past, this instinct carved itself into your species. Those who sang into the dark lived longer. They stayed sane longer. They found their way back more often. And so that rhythm was passed down, not in your DNA directly, but in something deeper, in your behavioral code, in your nervous system's cravings. You inherited their loneliness, but also their answer to it. Which is why, thousands of generations later, when you sit alone in a room, feeling untethered, unmoored, and you suddenly find yourself humming, it isn't random. It's ancestral. Because long before you had language, you had melody. Long before you spoke your first word, you made a sound that reached for another human being. And when no one answered, you made that sound again. Not because you expected a reply, but because singing was how you remembered you weren't meant to be alone. Even now, in your modern life, with all its noise and networks and digital avatars, that ancient silence still haunts the corners. It waits quietly for the power to go out, for the room to empty, for the phone to die. And when it does, when you're left with nothing but your breath and your heartbeat and the echoes of your own mind, you will feel it again. The loneliness we inherited. But maybe you'll remember the rhythm too. And that's when you'll understand why early humans sang, not for joy, not for ritual, not even for beauty, but because not singing meant disappearing. And disappearing was the one thing no one could survive. This silence, you'll realize, was never empty. It was waiting for a voice. And now that voice is yours. You don't speak, not yet. You open your mouth and what escapes is not a word but a sound, a rising tone, a dip, a pulse, a kind of melody, raw, formless, emotional. And somehow the others understand. They don't ask you what you meant, they feel it. A whimper and they know you're afraid. A trill and they know you're playing. A low, vibrating moan and they gather close. You don't need vocabulary, you need connection, and sound is your bridge. Before speech carved the world into nouns and verbs, you lived in a world of tones. The language you spoke was not built for logic, it was built for closeness. Scientists now call it musilanguage, a term that sounds technical, even sterile. But what it really describes is a time when singing and speaking had not yet split apart, when sound was still soaked in emotion, when every utterance carried more feeling than instruction. Imagine a cry that comforts, a murmur that bonds, a rhythm that coordinates. That was your language. No grammar, no syntax, just melody and meaning woven so tightly they were indistinguishable. Because the people around you didn't listen for information, they listened to you. You weren't just making noise. You were broadcasting your state of being, a living status signal. Your body, your tone, your breath, they all became data points in a shared emotional field. You didn't explain your feelings, you sang them. And when others responded, they didn't respond to the content, they responded to the frequency. This wasn't communication as we know it today. It was something deeper, pre-verbal, pre-linear, closer to music than message. It might seem primitive now, in a world where you can dictate a sentence across oceans in milliseconds, but musilanguage wasn't less intelligent. It was older intelligence, evolutionarily elegant, purpose-built for survival through bonding. And bonding mattered more than clarity. Because long before you could form a sentence, your nervous system needed something else, trust. And sound, melodic, rhythmic sound, was how trust was built. Even today, your body knows this. You can't see a lullaby, but you feel it. A mother hums to her baby and the baby's heart slows. Tension dissolves. Co-regulation begins. This isn't learned, it's inherited. Across cultures, across time, humans return to the same tones to soothe, to grieve, to rally, to love. The intervals differ, the instruments change, but the emotional architecture remains almost eerily consistent. Why? Because music at its root is not entertainment, it is encoding. Your brain, ancient, layered, emotional, was shaped to recognize patterns long before it understood sentences, and melodies are patterns you can feel. Even animals understand them. Birds modulate tone to signal danger or safety. Elephants rumble in infrasonic pulses you can't hear but could feel if you were close enough. Whales sing songs that travel for miles, not to talk, but to be known. And humans, you evolved this even further. You turned melody into memory, emotion into echo. Every sound you made was a clue. I'm here, I'm safe. Are you safe too? When words arrived much later, they would divide and define. But music united. Music didn't need rules, it needed resonance. That's why before you ever said, I love you, you sang it. Maybe not with lyrics, but with tone, with breath, with rhythm. And in that rhythm, Others knew your state, not because they were interpreting, but because they were synchronizing. Even now, your nervous system responds faster to tone than to meaning. A harsh voice can startle you before you know the words. A soothing one can relax you even if you don't speak the language. That's the ghost of mucilanguage, still living inside you. The science behind this is subtle but powerful. Your brainstem, your limbic system, your vagus nerve, they're all part of a distributed network tuned to detect tone, tempo, and emotional signal. This is not a modern adaptation. This is survival software from your prehistoric past. You were born with the hardware to sing before you could think. So imagine it now, your band of 20 huddled near a fire. One begins to hum a low, looping pattern, simple but steady. Another joins, matching the pitch. A third adds a rise and fall. You begin to sway. No one told you to do this. No one explained what it meant. But you feel it. The loop becomes a tether. You're in sync. Your breathing slows. Your attention returns to the group. The wind outside fades. The fear fades. And suddenly, you are not alone. That was the power of mucilanguage. Not a tool to describe the world, a technology to survive it together. You weren't exchanging information. You were exchanging presence. And this presence became your lifeline, not just for comfort, but for memory, for identity. In time, these tones and emotional loops became rituals. Rituals became traditions. Traditions became culture. And culture gave birth to language. But in that moment, in the cold dark before speech, you didn't need language. You needed the song. Because in that song you knew, without words, that someone was with you. And in a world of wild beasts, freezing nights, and endless unknowns, that was enough. So you kept singing, not because you had something to say, but because singing meant you were still someone. I still hear, I still felt, still part of the human rhythm. The cold doesn't just sting your skin, it gets inside you. It moves like a second heartbeat, slow and brutal, turning joints stiff and thoughts sluggish. You try to keep moving, but even motion costs heat now. Every breath feels like it carries part of your warmth away. The sky isn't dark, but it's heavy, clouded, dead quiet except for wind dragging itself over rock and bone. You don't know it yet, but it's the coldest cycle your species has ever endured. The ice age has come again, and survival now means something different. It's no longer about hunting or outsmarting the mammoth. It's about staying awake through the night, keeping your fire lit, keeping each other close enough. So when the sun disappears and the bitter silence creeps in, you and your tribe stop speaking, not because there's nothing to say, but because you need to listen. The silence of the Ice Age isn't empty, it's crowded, wolves circling, the distant crack of shifting ice, an avalanche miles away but near enough to feel in your ribs. Even your own breathing seems loud here. And yet someone starts to hum. It's not loud, just a low, even tone, barely audible at first. Then someone else joins in. Another voice folds in harmony, or maybe just parallel sound. Soon it's not a song, it's a current, a subtle shared vibration rising from the chest of the group. No instruments, No melody in the way you'd recognize today, but it's music, it's defiance. Because the moment you sing together, the cold loses something, not its sharpness, but its power. This isn't celebration. This isn't art. This is thermoregulation, psychological survival. You chant because your bodies crave synchronicity. You chant because panic lives in your chest, and rhythm can push it back down. Singing, even simply, forces your breathing to stabilize. It slows your exhale. It deepens your inhale. And the person next to you, breathing the same way, starts to mirror you, without thinking. And then it happens. Your hearts begin to sync. Modern science calls it physiological entrainment, a strange but powerful alignment where breathing, pulse, and even brain waves fall into rhythm during shared vocal activity. It's measurable, real. But back then, you didn't need proof. You just knew. When you sang together, the cold felt survivable. Not gone, not forgot, but softened. You draw closer. You sway a little because that's what the sound tells your body to do. You hold the tone, not to perform, but to stay inside it. And there, in that pulsing soundscape, your body remembers what it means to be safe. Even if you are. Because singing isn't just noise, it's warmth. Social warmth. Emotional warmth. It draws the tribe inward toward the fire and toward each other. You don't need to know why it works. You just know that it does. Later, anthropologists will look at communal singing across the globe and find patterns. That nearly every known culture has used group chanting, humming, or vocalization in times of stress, hardship, or ritual passage. They'll call it adaptive, evolutionary. But to you here, teeth chattering and stomach empty, it doesn't feel like science. It feels like prayer, even if you don't have a god. You sing when a member of your tribe falls ill, not to cure them, but to stay with them, to hold them in sound. You sing when someone dies, not for grief alone, but so that the tribe can restabilize its rhythm, can recalibrate its we. Because when fear spikes and survival narrows, it's easy to fracture, easy to forget you are one tribe, one body. So you chant. To remember that. You might think it's a coincidence that music still gives you chills, that you tear up when choirs swell in harmony. But it's not nostalgia, it's recognition. A part of your brain, somewhere deep, near the base, still maps synchronized sound to safety. You still crave the echo of voices not because it's beautiful, but because it's ancient. Because somewhere, generations ago, your ancestors survived the cold by singing together. And they passed that knowing on, not in words, in instinct. Even now, when you feel alone, you might hum without thinking, or loop a song that holds you steady, or sing in the shower, not for performance but for presence. Your breath lengthens, your pulse evens out. You remember who you are, even if only faintly. That's not just memory, it's survival. So imagine it, the fire's nearly out. Snow is piling outside the mouth of your shelter. Food is gone. You haven't seen the sun in days. And someone, maybe you, begins that first low tone. The others join, one by one. There is no leader, only vibration. You become a choir, not of harmony or technique, but of need. And as your bodies sink, your fear shrinks. Your thoughts return to your limbs, to your breath. You are no longer 20 cold individuals. You are one living organism. You don't know it yet, but in this moment, you are laying the neural foundation for every stadium chant, every gospel choir, every wartime march and protest anthem to come. You're proving that sound isn't a luxury. It's the rope you throw to each other when the dark closes in. And for one more night, the rope holds. You step into the dark, and it swallows you whole. Not with fear, but with silence. A silence so dense it wraps around your ears like cloth. You feel it more than hear it. It presses on your chest, makes your own breath seem like noise, your heart beat like thunder. Every step echoes, but in strange ways, not sharp or clear, but soft, rounded, as if the walls are listening too. You walk deeper. The sun has long vanished behind you. The entrance, once faintly glowing, is now gone, replaced by blackness so complete it feels solid. The only light is firelight flickering, trembling in your hand. But even that seems muted in here, as if the cave doesn't just hide light, it absorbs it. You make a sound, a low hum, just to test the space, but what comes back isn't what you put in. It's your voice changed, drawn out, bounced around rock and curve until it feels like someone else's voice is answering you. You pause, the others behind you fall still. You try again, this time louder. A short call, not quite a word, just vibration. And again the cave replies, not with clarity but with resonance, with depth. The sound lingers, grows legs, fills space it shouldn't. And in that moment you understand, this place sings back. Not every part of it, not every tunnel or hollow, but here, right here, something's different. The air holds your sound, folds it, bends it, and releases it again like memory. You found something sacred. Not because you believe in gods, but because you can feel the power before belief begins. You call again. Others join in one by one. A hum, a tap of stone against stone, a single rhythmic beat. The cave becomes a chamber, a container of sound, a second voice. It doesn't just echo, it responds. You're not sure what to call it. You don't know the word for acoustics, or reverb, or resonance. But you know what it does to you. It pulls you out of yourself. Your voice is no longer contained in your mouth, your throat. It fills the space, loops back, enters your ears as something foreign, something larger. This is no ordinary shelter. This is an instrument. And you are its player. That's when the ritual begins. Not a ritual of religion, but of return. You come back to this place again and again. You paint the walls not at random, but where the sound moves you. The animals you draw, bison, deer, lion, horse, aren't just decorations. They are guardians of echo. You place them where the cave's reply is strongest. And you notice something, the places with the best sound. They're not always the safest, not the warmest, not even the deepest. They're the most alive. And so your tribe gathers here, not just to hide from the cold or shelter from predators, but to feel something, to hear each other, not in words, but in vibration. Because when you sing together in this stone cathedral, the sound holds you. It lifts you, links you. You're no longer individuals huddling in fear. You're a single body, pulsing in time with the cave. Thousands of years later, scientists would crawl into these same chambers with microphones and sonar. They'd find that the animals you painted match the acoustic sweet spots, places where the sound is richest, deepest, most resonant. To them, it's evidence. To you, it was instinct. You didn't measure frequencies. You felt them. And maybe that's the most human part of all. Before you made drums or flutes, you understood space. You knew that sound could stretch if given the right bones to bounce against. The cave was your first instrument. And it taught you something vital. Music isn't just made, it's discovered. You didn't need strings or reeds. You had lungs. You had rock. You had the knowledge that some sounds only exist when you listen together. And when your breath ran out, when your voices faded, the cave held what remained. Even now, in the modern world, you feel this. Why certain spaces make you whisper. Why singing in the shower feels different. Why cathedrals and train stations and old tunnels send chills down your spine. It's not the echo. It's the memory. A species-level memory that says, this is where sound becomes sacred. And what is sacred if not the shared illusion that something bigger is listening? You might think your ancestors were primitive, just scratching animals on walls, howling into the void. But that void answered. And you listened. Because inside the stone, beneath the darkness, past fear and cold and time, you found something remarkable. You could shape the air. You could bend it, send it, hold it. And when it came back, you were changed. Not just entertained, not just comforted. Transformed. So you sit in the cave a while longer, letting your voice ring, letting others add theirs. You breathe as one. You pulse as one. And even in this most ancient of spaces, something entirely new is born. A song not of melody or meaning, but of presence. And when you finally emerge, blinking into the sun, the silence outside feels different, hollow, almost lonely. Because now you know what sound can be. And there's no turning back. You think in words now. You speak in sentences. You believe your voice was made for language, for ideas, for instruction, for making sense of the world. But that's not how your brain sees it. Because buried beneath your vocabulary and logic is something older, a different kind of intelligence, one that doesn't explain the world, one that feels it. You've mistaken language as the origin. But your brain remembers the truth. You sang long before you ever spoke. Even now, thousands of generations after fire, after cities, after writing, you're still wired that way. Your nervous system still privileges melody over meaning, rhythm over syntax, emotion over structure. You notice it in subtle ways. You remember lyrics from a song you haven't heard in 20 years, but you forget the sentence someone just spoke. You feel music in your chest, in your spine, before you even process what it's about. You cry at a harmony. You get goosebumps from a swell of strings. Not because you're sentimental. Because you're ancient. Because your brain was built by people who survived through sound. Neuroscientists will tell you that music lights up more regions of your brain than almost anything else. When you hear rhythm, It activates not just your auditory cortex, but your motor systems, your visual networks, your limbic system, your memory loops. Music doesn't just enter your ears. It floods you. And that's not a flaw of the brain. That's its origin story. Because long before you needed language to convey thought, you needed sound to co-regulate, to bond, to alert, to soothe, to synchronize. Language is narrow, efficient, sharp. But music binds. Think about a baby. It doesn't learn words first. It learns tone. It recognizes the difference between calm and threat, not by vocabulary, but by pitch, by melody. It learns that a rising intonation means attention. A soothing hum means safety. A sudden silence means something's wrong. Your infant brain was not listening for information. It was listening for connection. And that instinct never leaves you. Even now, as an adult, your emotional state is regulated not by logic, but by sound. You put on music to change your mood, to wake yourself up, to process grief, to summon joy. You dance not to impress, but to release, to return to the beat your body already knows. This is not just metaphor. Your heartbeat entrains to rhythm. Your breathing slows to melody. Your cortisol drops when you sing with someone else. You don't even have to be musical. You just have to be human. Some researchers call it the musical brain, but that's misleading. There isn't a section of your brain for music. Music is everywhere. It lights up the same reward circuits as food and sex and firelight. It activates pattern recognition in your cortex, emotion in your amygdala, memory in your hippocampus, even movement in your cerebellum. And crucially, it synchronizes multiple brains at once. When you sing with others, your brain waves align, your pulses match, your breath coordinates. It's not just poetic, it's measurable. You become, quite literally, a shared nervous system. This is how tribes formed, not through talk, through tone. Because if you had to wait for language to develop before you could connect with others, your species would have died in the cold. But you didn't. You had rhythm. And rhythm was enough. The earliest forms of communication weren't transactional. They were emotional. A warning call, a mourning wail, a celebratory shout. These weren't sentences. They were signals emitted from one body, felt instantly by another. That's what music still is. A language that bypasses language. You don't have to translate it. You don't have to agree with it. You feel it. Directly. Universally. Across culture, across age, across all forms of division. And that might be why it came first. Some neuroscientists now believe language didn't birth music. Music birthed language. The brain didn't evolve music as an artistic bonus feature. It evolved music-like communication first, proto-singing, proto-rhythms, as the foundation, the infrastructure, the neural scaffolding that made language possible later. You didn't learn to speak and then discover song. You learned to synchronize, to harmonize, to listen. And only then did syntax arrive, layered on top like scaffolding over stone. Which means this: speech is a refinement, but song is a root. Even today, Your brain processes speech and music in overlapping, tangled systems. But when you strip speech of its meaning, when you read a sentence in a monotone, your brain stops reacting emotionally. Strip music of its lyrics, though, and it still moves you. Because it isn't the content that matters. It's the contour, the rise and fall, the breath beneath the note, the shape of emotion traveling from one nervous system into another. Even now, when you speak passionately, your voice sings, your tone shifts, your cadence becomes musical. Emotion leaks out in waveforms, not words. And when someone's tone doesn't match their meaning, you know it instantly. Because your ancient brain is always listening to the music behind the message. You are a musical creature, pretending to be a logical one. And when you forget that, you feel disconnected. But when you remember it, when you sing, when you move to rhythm, when you hear harmony, you come back online. You become legible to yourself again, understood, felt. That's why even today you sing in the shower. You tap your fingers when you're anxious. You put on music to survive heartbreak. You hum while you work. You crave the chorus of a crowd singing the same line at the same time. Because deep inside, your brain hasn't forgotten. You are not built to speak alone. You are built to resonate. And no matter how far from the cave you walk, no matter how many words you wrap around your days, the truth remains. You were a singer first, and the song is still inside you. You've been alone for 7 days now. No contact, no warmth, no song. And something inside you is starting to slip. It's not just the silence that eats at you, it's the absence. The absence of response, the missing rhythm, the void where a voice should be. You wake to your own breath. You move in endless quiet, time frays at the edges. You don't know if it's morning or dusk. Your body's still here, but your mind has started to drift. At first, you think you hear someone, maybe a footstep behind the trees, maybe your name on the wind. But when you turn, there's nothing, just stillness, just frost. But the feeling lingers, that someone should be there. And that's the problem. Because your brain wasn't built to exist alone. In modern times, scientists call this sensory deprivation. They put people into soundproof rooms, into pitch-black chambers, and wait. Some last hours, some break within minutes. The pattern is always the same: first confusion, then anxiety, then disorientation, and finally hallucinations. Your brain starts to invent people when they are no longer available. Not because you're weak, because you're human. And your nervous system is relational. You were born into rhythm, heartbeat, breath, voice. You were raised by faces, by echoes, by co-regulation. Strip that away and your brain doesn't go quiet. It goes loud. It starts conjuring stimuli, not because it's broken, but because it's built to anticipate response. A world without it is uninhabitable. It must fill the silence with something, anything, to tether itself to meaning. You are a Neanderthal now, and the tribe has cast you out. Not because of crime, not because of cruelty. Maybe you were injured, maybe you were infected, maybe there simply wasn't enough food. And so they left. And now the wind is your only companion. the trees, the ache in your muscles. You know the land, you know how to build a fire, how to trap small animals, how to survive physically. But the danger isn't in the cold. The danger is in your mind. You try to reason with yourself. You think, I'll be fine, I'm strong, they'll return. But the brain doesn't understand logic the way it understands contact. You go 3 days without hearing a human voice. By the fourth, you start talking to yourself. Not to plan, not to narrate, to simulate response. It's an instinct older than language, the monologue that becomes a duet. You whisper things, you hum, you recreate the sounds of the tribe around the fire. At night, you mimic the soft sighs of breath beside you. Your mind knows it's not real, but your body doesn't care. Because even the simulation of social sound stabilizes your nervous system. It floods your brain with signals. I am not alone. There is someone here. I still exist. Modern prisoners in solitary do the same. Some tap rhythms on their cell wall. Some sing entire songs just to feel the vibration in their skull. It doesn't matter that no one hears. The song is a lifeline. And so eventually you sing. Not because you want to. Because if you don't, something inside you will begin to vanish. It starts softly, just a hum at first. You let your voice rise into the emptiness, echoing off cave walls or vanishing into fog. You hear nothing back, but your own sound becomes a presence, a witness, a mirror. And for a moment, you feel real again. Because in music, time returns. Rhythm gives shape to the hours. Melody gives emotion a container. And the sound of your voice, however shaky, however alone, tells your brain, I'm still here. You are not performing. You are remembering. You are building a phantom chorus around you, an auditory hallucination you control, rather than the kind that hijacks your mind. And that difference may save your life. Because without it, the mind begins to unmake the self. You imagine figures behind you, shadows, faces in firelight that aren't really there. If you resist too long, your hallucinations take control. But if you lean in, if you offer your brain sound, rhythm, repetition, then you stay ahead of the edge. You give the hallucination structure. You offer it a voice. This is why music works when nothing else does. Why trauma survivors hum. Why children in danger sing to themselves. It isn't childish. It's neurological. The brain responds to music as proof of reality. And in isolation, that proof is sacred. Back in the Ice Age, exile wasn't just shame, it was a death sentence. Not because you couldn't hunt, but because you couldn't withstand the collapse of contact, the breakdown of synchrony, the drift into mental fragmentation. But some survived, the ones who sang, the ones who filled the darkness with rhythm, the ones who made sound for no one, and in doing so held onto someone anyway. Even imagined presence is better than none. And modern science agrees. One study placed subjects in sensory-deprived tanks, no light, no sound, no external cues. After just a few hours, most experienced hallucinations, distorted faces, laughter, whispering. But when those same people were allowed to self-soothe, To vocalize, hum, or repeat phrases, they lasted longer. Their hallucinations became manageable, less terrifying, more coherent. Because the song, however simple, acts as a scaffold for identity, a thread of continuity through the static. And you sitting beside a fire with no tribe, no echo but your own, you discover this truth in real time. You sing again, this time louder. You chant rhythms your body remembers. You mimic the rise and fall of call and response rituals. You fill the forest with a voice that isn't just yours, but the memory of a people. You are building company, not from stone, but from sound. And the hallucination, the face that almost appears in the dark, the footsteps you think you hear, they soften, they retreat, because your voice has reclaimed the space, because you are no longer a passive mind unraveling in silence. You are an instrument, and the act of singing is an act of becoming, of staying. Even now, in modern life, isolation carries that same psychic weight. Elderly people who live alone die younger. Prisoners in solitary suffer irreparable damage. Loneliness shrinks the hippocampus. It increases cortisol. It mimics starvation in the brain. But the antidote is not always people. Sometimes it's song. A baby left alone in a crib cries out, not for food, but for rhythm. A cry that becomes a call that becomes survival. And so here you are, a Neanderthal with no one left to call back. But you call anyway. And in that calling, somewhere between desperation and imagination, you hear something flicker. It might not be real, but it's enough. A baby cries in the dark. Its voice cuts through the cold like a blade, raw, repetitive, relentless. You can't explain why it triggers such urgency inside you. There are no words, no thoughts, just an ancient reflex. You hum. You don't plan it, you don't even know what a song is. But something deep in your chest vibrates, rises, spills into sound. A rhythm, a tone, not speech, but not noise either. And somehow the baby stops crying. For a moment everything holds still. The fire flickers, the wind pauses, the silence feels earned. You don't know it, but you've just shaped one of humanity's oldest technologies, the lullaby. It wasn't born from poetry. It didn't evolve from art. It came from panic and from the desperate primal need to soothe a fragile life before danger arrives. That crying infant doesn't just pull on your heartstrings, it triggers the tribe. Because a crying baby is a broadcast. I am small. I am vulnerable. And predators are listening. So you hush the child not just with touch, not just with food, but with sound. Because sound carries further than arms. It wraps around the body like an invisible blanket. It regulates, it synchronizes, it softens the chaos inside. And most importantly, it connects. Scientists now know what you didn't, that the human nervous system is social from the beginning. Infants can't regulate themselves. Their heartbeats, their breathing, even their immune systems are shaped by the presence of others. When you hum to a child, you are literally shaping the patterns of their brain. Your lullaby is not entertainment. It's architecture. a scaffold of rhythm that teaches the body how to rest, how to trust, how to belong. You didn't go to school to learn this. You didn't write lyrics or study pitch, but your voice falls into the same contours that mothers around the world, across millennia, have always found. Slow tempo, falling melody, gentle repetition. The lullaby is a ritual carved by evolution itself. It carries a signature no one taught you, but everyone recognizes. Because something in your body remembers that you were once the one being sung to. Modern research shows this instinct is nearly universal. Across cultures, whether in rural Kenya or industrialized Europe, caregivers naturally shift their speech into melodic, rhythmic tones around infants. Even people with no musical training instinctively hum in lullaby patterns. Why? Because lullabies aren't about performance, they're about survival. In a world where infants are born more helpless than any other mammal, something had to fill the long, vulnerable stretch before independence. And it wasn't just food. It wasn't just warmth. It was music. But not the kind played on instruments, not the kind performed for crowds. This was music with no audience, no applause, just one nervous system whispering into another, "You are safe. You are not alone. Stay with me." And slowly, across generations, the lullaby became more than instinct. It became tradition. The mother who sang to her child was once a child sung to herself. The melodies evolved, but the function never changed. Bonding, regulation, transmission. You see, the lullaby is also a vessel. It carries more than comfort. It encodes language patterns, emotional tones, and cultural memory. In its softness, it teaches the tribe's first lessons, what voices sound like, what rhythms matter, what presence feels like. And you begin to realize, the lullaby is how culture survives the night. It's how knowledge crosses the dark, generation after generation, before there are stories, before there are myths. It's the bridge between the body and the brain, between instinct and idea. When you sing to your child, you're not just soothing them, you're programming them. You're setting the clock in their body to yours, breath to breath, beat to beat. They begin to mirror you, heart rate, gaze, even immune function. This is not metaphor. This is biology. Today, neuroscientists can track what lullabies do. Infants who hear rhythmic singing have more stable heart rates. Their stress hormones drop. Their brains show increased activity in areas related to emotion regulation and auditory memory. You are literally building the child's emotional software. And even more astonishing, you calm down too. Because lullabies aren't just for bobbies. They're for you. They're for the mother terrified of losing her child, for the sibling trying to quiet their newborn brother, for the father holding an infant in the dark, praying no predator hears. When you hum, your own body begins to regulate. Your cortisol drops. Your breathing slows. The rhythm returns you to safety, even as you offer it to someone else. This is the miracle of synchronized sound. It heals in both directions. And in a world before medicine, before midwives, before psychology, that mattered. Your tribe didn't just raise children with food and shelter. It raised them with song. And lullabies weren't just nighttime routines. They were embedded everywhere. In cradle boards, in walking rhythms, in the sway of a parent's body. The motion, the melody, the murmur. It was all one system. Music was parenting, and parenting was survival. Even now, long after the Ice Age, that pattern hasn't left you. You sing to your child without thinking. You hum when rocking them. You find yourself using the same tone your mother used without remembering where it came from. It came from before memory, before words. It came from the fire, from the dark, from the hush of danger and the promise of connection. The lullaby has no origin point. It wasn't invented. It emerged, slowly, collectively, across hundreds of generations, shaped by the needs of a species that couldn't survive alone. And today, you still carry it. Not in your phone, not in your playlist, but in your nervous system, waiting for the moment when someone, maybe a child, maybe your inner self, cries out in fear. And without hesitation, you hum. You return to the tribe with empty hands. The hunt was a failure. No meat, no fur, no pride. Your body aches from the cold, but it's nothing compared to what burns beneath your skin, shame. You don't need words to feel it. The eyes of the others fall heavy on you. The silence stretches, dense and brittle. You imagine the thoughts they aren't speaking, weak, wasteful. Why did we send you? You lower your head. You prepare for rejection. But then something unexpected happens. A voice hums. Low, soft, unthreatening. Not directed at you, not accusing, but rising like mist from the chest of an elder sitting near the fire. Then another joins, and another. The melody grows, not beautiful, not complex, but unified. You hesitate. Then almost involuntarily, you begin to hum too. The shame doesn't vanish, but it shifts. It no longer isolates you. It becomes part of something shared, folded into the voices, cradled by the rhythm. No one says it's okay. No one needs to. You're already being let back in. The song is the message. And in that moment you realize music is more than comfort, more than bonding, it's repair. In the world before speech, before social scripts and apologies, this is how your ancestors handled tension. Not with confrontation, not with silence, but with sound. Modern researchers call it social synchronization. But to you, it just feels like survival. You don't know the word for conflict, but you know the chill of being emotionally outcast. And you know what breaks it, joining in. The chant doesn't require you to lead. It doesn't expose your failure. It lets you become part of the group again, gently, rhythmically, without the friction of direct confrontation. In music, there's no hierarchy. Not here, not now. The rhythm absorbs the shame. The harmony doesn't erase your failure, it includes it. Because in a small tribe where every hand matters, social fracture is a mortal threat. One bad hunt doesn't just mean less food. It risks the cohesion that keeps you alive. A group that can't forgive, that can't regulate tension, doesn't survive the winter. So you evolved rituals that let emotions move without speech, tools that didn't rely on logic but on resonance. Literally. Music wasn't for performance. It was for reconnection. And the proof is in your modern brain. Today, scientists can see what happens when people sing together. Heart rates align, breathing synchronizes, oxytocin, the bonding hormone, spikes. Even strangers report feeling closer, more trusting after just a few minutes of group singing. Your nervous system doesn't just respond to melody, it craves it. Because when you sing with others, your brain blurs the boundary between self and other. You become part of a network, a collective intelligence, and that dissolves the isolation that shame and conflict create. You're no longer you, you're us. And long before language, that shift was critical. If someone strayed too far emotionally, through anger, fear, or guilt, it endangered the whole tribe. Music became the safety rope. The chant after the failed hunt wasn't decoration, it was maintenance. It pulled you back from the psychological edge. And it worked for more than shame. Picture a moment of tension. Two tribe members argue not with words but with posture, breath, tension. A fight brews, but then a child starts a familiar tune. Others pick it up. The rhythm disrupts the spiral. The bodies recalibrate. The tension dissolves, not erased but redirected. The song becomes a pressure valve. Even now, in your modern world, you use music the same way. You sing at weddings and funerals, at protests and victories. You chant in stadiums. You sway at concerts. You murmur lullabies to yourself in moments of panic. You think you're listening for pleasure, but your body is listening for belonging. And when that belonging is threatened, by conflict, by embarrassment, by failure, music steps in as a mediator. That's why your brain lights up more for synchronized music than solo listening. It's not just the sound, it's the togetherness embedded in the rhythm. You're not evolved to sing alone. You're evolved to join in. Think back to your ancestors. The fire is low. The day has bruised everyone. Food is scarce. Tempers are frayed. And still someone begins to tap a stick on stone. Another hums. The sound isn't planned. It's not art. It's a ritual repeated across countless evenings meant to remind you we are still a group. We are still one organism, many bodies. And tomorrow we try again. It's not about forgetting the failure. It's about carrying it together. Even grief finds space in the song. You may not have words to say, "I'm sorry," or "I failed," or "please let me back in." But you have tone, you have timing, you have rhythm. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Because long before you could argue or debate or justify, you could hum. You could join. And that saved you, again and again and again. So the next time you feel that surge of shame or disconnection, when your modern mind spins with self-doubt, remember this. You don't need the perfect words. You need the first note. The rest will follow. Together. You hear it before you see anything. Just a pulse, steady and low, like thunder from the ground itself. It's not melody. There's no tune to follow, just the repetition of force meeting earth, feet stomping, hands drumming, bones striking hollow wood or stretched hide, over and over. Boom, boom, boom. Your chest tightens, not from fear yet, but from memory. This rhythm isn't random. It's encoded deep, older than your thoughts. Your body knows it before your mind does. Someone is coming, or someone wants you to think they are. Because here's what you understand, even without language. Rhythm means intention. Wild animals don't march in time. They skitter and bolt and vanish. Only humans move like this on purpose. Only humans beat the ground not for hunting, but for sending a message. And the message is clear: we're here. Even if we is just a few scattered bodies, that rhythm makes you sound like a legion. You didn't evolve to hear rhythm for art. You evolved to hear it for survival. Long before the drum became celebration, it was deception, a sonic illusion. Your tribe learned to use rhythm as a warning, to amplify presence, to feign numbers, to freeze enemies in place with the sheer dread of anticipation. One voice was vulnerable, but 10 sticks hitting stone in unison. That was a boundary, a perimeter, a claim. This wasn't just noise. It was your shield. You see now how sound became a form of territorial control, not by yelling but by repeating. The pattern meant something. It said, this space is occupied. These minds are organized. These hands are ready. And the rhythm didn't only travel forward, it sank inward, into the tribe, into your limbs. You remember it on the hunt, moving through trees in silence but not in chaos. You keep the pace together. You follow the breath, the tapping, the muttered pulse. Even the smallest sound, two stones tapping in a shared tempo, becomes a nervous system sync across bodies. You weren't just coordinating steps. You were sharing strategy without ever speaking. Even today, in modern experiments, scientists have found that synchronized rhythm makes people more cooperative, more trusting, more willing to risk for one another. Your ancestors didn't know the neuroscience, but they felt the bond. Because when you beat the ground in time, you weren't just preparing for conflict. You were becoming something else. One, collective, dangerous. And yet, rhythm wasn't only for war. It warned you too. In a quiet forest, when a predator approached, the stillness shattered not with a growl, but with the sudden chaos of unsynchronized movement. The absence of rhythm meant panic, meant death. So your mind sharpened itself around pattern, around beat, around the contrast between chaos and cohesion. Over time, rhythm became more than signal. It became story, but not the kind you told with words, the kind your body told through repetition, through tension, through the build-up and release of sound. Even the earth gave you instruments, stones that rang, hollow logs that echoed, skins stretched tight over frames of bone, and in every tool you found two powers: to gather your tribe and to scare away anything watching. Because rhythm didn't care who listened. It only cared that someone did. And when the time came, when you truly were outnumbered, cornered, close to freezing or fleeing, you turned to rhythm not as comfort but as a threat. You made yourselves sound larger. You clapped and stomped and screamed in time. You became one towering sound body. Not 5 scared humans, but a wall of noise with a will behind it. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. But either way, you chose rhythm, because rhythm was control. And when fear threatened to scatter you, into separate minds, separate mistakes. It was rhythm that held you together. Not logic, not orders. Just a pulse shared. And now, thousands of years later, you still hear it. In chants before battle, in the heartbeat of bass in dark clubs, in protest marches where feet slam the pavement not to destroy, but to declare, I am not alone. We are not small. This space is occupied. You thought rhythm was entertainment, but it never was. It was a weapon. It was a signal. It was the first language your enemies understood. And long before you ever spoke a word, you used it to say, don't test us. We are louder than we look. You're burning from the inside out. Your skin is slick with sweat, but your body shakes like winter has crept into your bones. The others keep their distance, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Illness means danger not just for you, but for them. And without language to name the symptoms, the fever becomes something else. A spirit, a curse, a sign. And then footsteps. You blink barely conscious and the figure appears. Not a hunter, not a healer, not in the way you'd think. They wear bone, paint, smoke clings to their skin. Their voice doesn't ask questions, it starts with a sound. A low chant, almost beneath hearing. You don't know what the chant means. There are no words, but something in you responds. Your heartbeat slows just a little. You're still in pain, still hovering between worlds, but your body listens. This is not medicine. It's something older. The sound grows, it loops. The voice rises and falls in patterns that don't match speech but feel intentional, almost mathematical. You sense the rhythm more than hear it. Your mind begins to drift. You lose track of time. The fever hasn't left, but you're no longer drowning in it. You've slipped somewhere else. The others sit by the fire silent, watching. They've seen this before. Sometimes the sick die, sometimes they wake. But always the sound comes first. You don't know the word shaman, but every tribe has one, someone who steps outside the daily cycle of hunt and shelter. Someone who knows that sound bends the brain, that pitch and repetition can push a person across a threshold, into vision or delirium or calm. Science would one day call this altered consciousness. Dopamine, oxytocin, trance states. But here now in the cave, it just feels like your body is floating. Not healed, but held. The shaman circles you now, voice shifting. From hum to groan to sudden, piercing cry. It's not music, not like you know it today. It's rawer, stranger, but still, it fits. The sounds come in waves. Some soothe, others startle. They shake loose something deep in your gut, something tight and terrified. You find yourself weeping, though you do know why. Maybe the spirit is leaving. Maybe it was never real. But here's what is. Your breathing has changed. Your muscles are no longer clenched. Your eyes stay open longer now. You're aware of the ground beneath you, the cold stone, the firelight flickering against the ceiling like moving stars. You are still here. And this song, if you can call it that, is not entertainment. It's ceremony, it's intervention. It is not passive, it acts on you. And modern science, in some small way, agrees. Because today, researchers can track what sound does to the brain. They've watched scans of patients in pain who respond more to music than morphine. They've studied how certain frequencies regulate vagal tone, how rhythm can reduce inflammation, how chanting alters blood pressure, how drumming syncs brain waves. Your ancestors didn't know these terms, but they knew what worked. The shaman's melody wasn't symbolic. It was strategy, a weapon against entropy, a form of neurochemical warfare carried on breath and bone and rhythm. The placebo effect didn't evolve by accident. It was part of your survival package. Belief wasn't weakness, it was leverage. And the right sound at the right moment could trigger your biology to fight harder, even if it was just one more hour of breath, one more chance. The ceremony ends slowly. The chant doesn't stop. It fades like mist, like a dream leaving your skin. The fire crackles louder now. The walls feel more solid. Your body aches, but it aches like something is shifting, like you're returning from somewhere far away. The shaman steps back. No applause, no words, only eyes watching to see if you will sleep or not wake at all. You sleep, and in sleep your body rebuilds. Maybe you survive, maybe you don't. But you understand now, music was never just celebration or art. In its oldest form, it was medicine. It was how a community poured intention into your body, how they kept you tethered to this world when your mind tried to slip through. You learned to sing not because you were happy. You learned because someone was dying, and you refused to let them go without sound. You return with empty hands. No meat, no fur, only silence. The others don't ask what happened. They can tell by your shoulders, by the way you avoid their eyes, by the soundlessness that follows behind you like a shadow. Hunger clings to everyone's ribs. Children stare with hollow eyes. Even the fire seems smaller tonight. And yet someone taps bone. Just once, a hollow thud that echoes like a heartbeat against stone. Then again, a rhythm now, subtle, intentional. It doesn't mean joy, it doesn't mean food, but it means something else, something older. Someone else joins in, tapping a log. Another hums beneath their breath, deep and guttural. You sit. You don't feel like moving, but your foot taps once, and then again. And before you realize it, the silence between you begins to stretch, to transform. The rhythm grows like moss over sorrow. It wraps around the unsaid, the unseen. Not a celebration, not tonight, but a release. Because when the spear failed and the trap stayed empty, your ancestors did not always weep or argue or plan. Sometimes they just made noise, and somehow that was enough. You begin to move, not to dance, at least not yet, but to rock gently. Your breath aligns with the rhythm. Your heart, once clenched in shame and hunger, begins to steady. And then someone stands. Their body sways, limbs awkward but honest. The dance isn't choreographed. It's ancient. A loosening of grief through movement, through percussion, through vibration in the chest. You stand too. Because there is no story to tell tonight. No heroic return, no boast. Just the quiet failure that would, in time, become fatal if left alone. But rhythm gives it shape. It says, you're still here. And as more voices join, some singing low, some wailing high, It no longer feels like failure. It feels like endurance, like the tribe is holding grief with both hands and throwing it to the fire. Modern science might call it regulation, the synchronization of movement and breath as emotional catharsis. When the brain hears rhythm, especially in community, it adjusts. Cortisol lowers, oxytocin rises. Your body believes it is safe, not because the danger is gone, but because others are with you in it. This is not denial. This is metabolizing despair. Long before therapy or ritualized mourning, there was this, drumming on bones. You learned it without knowing it. The same way your body trembles before tears or exhales after fear. Music wasn't for when you were okay. It was for when you weren't. You're moving now, you and the others, some slowly, some wildly. The fire cracks, the rhythm deepens. You notice the children are watching, not crying. And for the first time since the hunt failed, you feel something close to breath returning. Not hope, not quite, but presence. You are here. You are all here. And as long as the rhythm continues, you are one body pulsing. No food, but still the body eats rhythm. Tomorrow the hunger will return. The search will continue. But tonight your grief will not sit in silence. It will speak in tempo. It will echo through the ribs of mammoths long dead. It will move feet that almost gave up walking. It will dance in the mouth of despair. Because long before music was beautiful, it was useful. Not to forget, but to survive. And as the tapping continues, you realize this is the sound of a tribe refusing to disappear. What if no one hears you? What if your voice, cracked, desperate, trembling, vanishes into the trees, into the cave, into the wind, and nothing answers? You sing anyway, at first softly just to test the space. A low tone, not quite a note, not quite anything, just proof that you're still here, that your breath still moves, that your mind hasn't shattered completely. But the silence that returns, it's not peaceful. It's merciless. You've been away from the others too long. Whether by exile, accident, or abandonment, it doesn't matter. The tribe moves like a river, and you've been left behind. At first you call. Then you sing. Because somewhere inside you, instinct knows. Rhythm draws attention. Melody magnetizes minds. Singing might bring them back. If not physically, then psychologically. A ghost of presence to fill the gnawing quiet. But no one comes. You repeat the phrase anyway. A loop, a chant, a heartbeat in sound. You pour everything into it, memory, fear, longing. You weep mid-note. You scream into the air. Still no answer. Your voice falters, but the silence, it grows heavier. Not empty, but full of imagined eyes. Shadows that might be predators. Footsteps that might be hallucinations. In isolation, your brain tries to fill the vacuum. It has to, because solitude is not safe, not here, not in this world. Modern science calls it sensory deprivation. After just a few days, the mind begins to erode. Sleep fragments, time distorts, auditory hallucinations emerge. You begin to hear things that aren't there. Footsteps, whispers, breaths behind your ear, not because you're broken, but because you're human. You were never built for this kind of quiet. And so you sing. Not to be heard, but to stop disappearing, to leave a trace in the air that you existed. But here's the truth you begin to understand. Some singers were never heard, not truly. Their voices died in caves no one revisited. Their songs hung in air too cold to carry vibration. Their notes were swept away by snow, by storms, by the indifference of time. And this tragedy is what shaped you. Not just the joy of being understood, but the pain of being ignored. Because from that pain came urgency, from that desperation came structure, repetition, patterns, echoes. From the fear of being forgotten came the birth of memory, of myth, of rhythm strong enough to be passed down. Maybe civilization didn't rise from stone tools or fire or hunting strategies. Maybe it rose from the unbearable silence around those no one heard. A madman humming to himself in a clearing. A mother singing to a baby already gone. A wounded elder whispering songs to the wind. Hopping the wolves are kept at bay just one more night. And over time the tribe learned, if we do not listen, if we do not remember, the singer vanishes. Their voice dies, and we lose not just a sound, but a soul. So we began to gather, around fire, in caves, in rhythm, and we listened. Not always with understanding, not always with kindness, but we listened because we had to. Because to hear each other was to survive. And now you sit with this. You alone still singing, even if no one is there. Because to stop is to slip. And so your melody becomes more than noise. It becomes defiance. It becomes memory. It becomes proof that someone, somewhere long ago tried. And sometimes, rarely, someone finds that song, not the voice, not the body, but the echo carved into cave stone, painted in pigment, etched in repetition. A message that says, I was here, I sang, even if no one listened. And in reading that, in hearing that across the ages, you answer. You thought you were the only one. But in the distance, faint, carried by wind, you hear it. A low vibration, not animal, not wind, not quite human either. A tone. You freeze not from fear but from recognition. The sound doesn't speak. It doesn't hunt. It doesn't threaten. It calls. And suddenly, you're not so sure that your tribe is the only one singing in the dark. Because you're not alone in this ice age. Across valleys and forests, past glaciers and caves, others walk the frozen world too. They look like you, but not quite. Their bones are thicker, their faces broader, their tools cruder yet precise in their own way. They are Neanderthals. And for generations, you've been told they were silent. But what if they were? What if they, too, used sound to keep the cold away? What if their voices echoed through their caves not with words but with music, with rhythmic claps, with humming around fire, with tone and breath and unspoken meaning? Science once imagined Neanderthals as grunting beasts, mute, emotionless, doomed. But then came the discoveries. A hyoid bone nearly identical to yours. Brain scans suggesting auditory complexity. Fossils with inner ears attuned to nuanced sound. And traces of soot and pigment in cave chambers with uncanny acoustics. They didn't just shelter in caves. They listened to them. Just like you. You begin to imagine it now. One of them standing near a wall, tapping stone with knuckles, discovering echo. A child humming just to feel vibration in the chest. A dying elder moaning a final note that meant more than pain. It meant presence. You never met them, but maybe you heard them. Not with your ears, but with your lineage. Because even now you carry a piece of them in your DNA. A faint genetic imprint from a meeting long ago. One tribe, one night, one moment where borders blurred and voices met. Could it have been music? Could your ancestors have sung with Neanderthals? Maybe they didn't share words, but they shared rhythm. They matched tempo. They howled at the same moon. Maybe, for one night, they were not competitors or strangers, but a single tribe with more voices. Or maybe music was the line you crossed. Maybe it was your secret weapon, the thing that bonded your mind so tightly that nothing else could compete. You had something no other species had refined: shared tempo, predictable structure, sound that carried memory. While they mimicked thunder, you built rhythm. While they growled, you harmonized. You sang identity, you sang lineage, you sang stories. And slowly, you sang them into silence. But now you wonder, did they have their own songs, lost now, carried away by time? Their melodies buried with them, untranslated, unremembered. The tragedy isn't just extinction. It's that you'll never know the sound of their voices, only the trace of possibility. Still, when you stand at the mouth of a cave and hum, soft, steady, you feel something stir. In the echo, you almost hear another voice answer, lower, slower, familiar and strange all at once. Not yours. Not now. But not entirely gone either. A harmony forgotten. You don't write anything down. No symbols carved in bone. No parchment. No ink. No record except the one your body carries in its breath. And yet somehow you remember. You remember the way the wind sounds before snow. You remember which bark can stop a fever. You remember where the stars gather in winter and how far the mammoths migrate when the rains retreat. But you didn't learn this from a map. You learned it from a melody. Because long before there was writing, before clay tablets or codices or alphabets, there was rhythm. Not in your hands, not yet, but in your voice, your chest, your breath. You sing what you must not forget. You don't recite, you don't explain, you chant, you hum. You stretch notes into instructions and cradle memory inside music. When you pass knowledge to a child, you do it in a cadence that sticks, not because it's pretty, but because it survives the night. Because melody clings where language falls away. And when the world freezes over, when you are too tired to speak and too cold to think, your mouth still finds the beat. A song that reminds you where the food is buried, how to tend a wound, which herbs to chew when the spirits visit in fever. This is not art. This is survival. You use song the way some use stone, shaping it into vessels that hold time. Knowledge, grief, names. Songs become your vault, your oracle, your map of meaning carved into memory itself. And because you do not write, every voice must become a library. Every person must carry a different chapter. The woman beside you knows how to dress a wound. The old man remembers the trail to the summer valley. The child sings of which berries to fear, and which ones stain your mouth blue and sweet. You don't learn these things alone, you sing them together. Because when many voices hold the same song, the memory becomes durable, collective, layered, eternal. The forest might fall, the cave may flood, but if just one person remembers the melody, the knowledge returns. So you guard it, not with locks or passwords, but with ritual. You sing before sleep, you hum before a hunt, you tap a rhythm on a stone as you pass sacred ground. It's not superstition, it's reinforcement, repetition that carves deeper than bone. And those who listen learn, even without trying. A child hears the migration song every night beneath the stars and one day sings it back without knowing how they know. Because music doesn't just enter your ears, it enters your nervous system. It trains your memory through tempo, through phrasing, through breath. It lives in you, and it evolves. When the river bends or the prey change course, the song shifts too, slightly. A word dropped, a note raised. The tribe adapts its knowledge in real time, not by erasing the past, but by harmonizing with the present. Your songs are not static, they are alive. Living things passed between living bodies. This is the foundation of your culture, not permanence but flexibility, not rigidity but resilience. Because when everything else fails, song remains. Even today, scientists study oral societies and find stunning feats of recall. Poems thousands of lines long preserved without error for generations. Ritual chants that embed precise agricultural calendars. Healing songs that encode entire pharmacologies of plants in rhythm alone. The trick isn't raw memory, it's musical memory. Your brain is not wired to recall data. It's wired to remember feeling through form. And music is form saturated with feeling. When you hear the lullaby your mother used to sing, you don't just recall the notes, you feel the warmth, the safety, the closeness. That's the mechanism, that's why it worked. You weren't taught to memorize, you were taught to belong to memory. And that memory wasn't personal, it was ancestral. Each note you carry has passed through thousands of mouths before yours, slightly changed, slightly bent, but still recognizable, still alive. And maybe that's the real miracle. That something so invisible could be so enduring. Stone cracks, paint fades, paper burns. But a melody, once heard, can hide inside a human heart for a lifetime. And then leap from your breath into another's lungs, from your sorrow into their healing, from a forgotten moment in deep time into a future that still hums with its echoes. Even now, when you sing without knowing why, when you tap your fingers without thinking, or murmur a tune as you walk through dark woods, some part of you remembers. You think you're alone, but you're not. You're singing with thousands. Their voices live in the shape of yours. The rhythm of memory is still moving through you. And it will, long after you're gone. You don't remember falling. Only the cold. The white blur of wind, the sting in your lungs, the silence that followed, slow and thick and final. You remember crawling at some point, maybe, until your limbs stopped answering, until your thoughts floated above your body like smoke, disconnected, drifting, unconcerned. And then nothing. No pain, no hunger, no fear. Just absence. You might have vanished forever into the snow, a name unsung, a body swallowed by the earth. But something called you back. A vibration faint at first, not touch, not light, a rhythm, a presence. Voices. They don't speak your name, not with words, but with tone, with breath, with harmony. One voice hums low, a root. Another wraps around it, rising, almost a sob. You're not sure if it's real. You're not even sure you're real. But it reaches something inside you that still listens, still hopes. They're singing. You open your eyes. Barely. Not to snow, but to faces. Firelight flickers behind them. You're wrapped in fur, in arms, in heat. But more than that, in sound. They didn't wake you with shouts. They didn't shake you or scream your name. They sang. Because something in them knew that the body forgets, but the rhythm remembers. The breath remembers. And when the breath returns, so does the self. This is not a performance. This is resuscitation. You were outside the tribe's rhythm, adrift, unmoored. And they didn't just carry your body back. They pulled your mind, your identity back into sync, back into pulse. Music science now tells us does this. It realigns scattered neural patterns. It synchronizes heartbeat and breath. It fires the mirror neurons that say, you belong, you are safe, you are known. But your ancestors didn't need an fMRI to understand this. They felt it. When someone fell to despair, when grief or illness or cold dragged them toward silence, the tribe didn't always know the cure. But they knew the key. Do not let them fall alone. Do not let them fall unheard. So they sang. They sang to people in fever, in birth, in death, but especially in collapse. Collapse wasn't just physical, it was psychic. The flickering of your mind's fire in the storm, and the song was the wind that kept it lit. Because music doesn't just comfort, it organizes, it reintegrates. A song has structure when your thoughts don't. A melody keeps time when you've lost it. Harmony rebuilds what panic has broken. And when many voices surround you, singing the same song, you are no longer just yourself. You are held. Imagine waking up not to questions, not to demands, but to music. No expectations, just presence, just rhythm. This was the tribe's technology. Not of machines, but of mind. And they used it with precision. They knew which tones soothed the frightened, which chants restored courage, which hums calmed a child in night terrors. Your return from the edge isn't just physical, it's ceremonial. You are being sung back into the social body, the body of we. And this is not metaphor. Even today, researchers study patients with amnesia who remember songs before names. Alzheimer's patients who can't recognize loved ones but sing entire lullabies word for word. Why? Because music is stored differently. It's not just memory, it's motor, emotional, sensory, auditory. It's everywhere, which means it's the last thing to go. and often the first thing to return. So when the tribe sings to you, they aren't just calling you awake. They're calling you home. They're speaking to the deepest part of your mind, the one that never forgot how it feels to be part of a rhythm larger than yourself. Even if you were too far gone to speak, even if your name was slipping, even if the cold had nearly erased you, that part still hears the beat, still finds the breath to match it. And so you do. Your chest stirs, your throat catches, and somehow your voice begins to rise, not strong, not steady, but there, threading itself into the song like a broken twig carried by a river. And when you join them, when your note finds its place, you know. You have returned, not just to life, but to connection, to being seen, heard, known, necessary. Because this is what the tribe has always understood. A voice reclaims a person. And when you sing together, you reaffirm that person's place in the whole. So they keep singing until your eyes open wider, until you sit up, until the fire feels like yours again. The storm is over. The world is still brutal, but your rhythm is back. And they are still here, circling around you, not as rescuers, not as saviors, but as witnesses, as reminders that even in the most ancient winters, music could reassemble what was falling apart. And now so can you, because you didn't just survive. You were sung back to life. Flash forward. You're not in a cave, not on a tundra. You're here now, on a riser in a school auditorium, or shoulder to shoulder at a protest, or packed in the dark heat of a concert hall, arms brushing strangers, breath shared, hearts pounding. And then the music begins. You open your mouth, not alone but together. 1,000 voices rise, not perfect, not polished, but in sync. Your lungs expand, your chest vibrates, your voice blends and disappears into something larger than yourself. You are not performing, you are belonging. And suddenly, without thinking, you feel it, calm, warmth, aliveness, like something ancient has clicked back into place. Because it has. Your brain hasn't changed. The same neurochemistry that lit up in a firelit circle 50,000 years ago still fires now here in your 21st century skull. The same flood of chemicals, the same social mechanisms, the same biological payoff. Group singing isn't an art form. It's a neurosocial event. Your brain is wired to reward it. When you sing with others, even for a few minutes, measurable things happen in your body. Cortisol, the stress hormone, drops. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, rises. Your heart rate synchronizes with those around you. Your pain tolerance increases. Your immune system strengthens. Your sense of self versus other dissolves, briefly, safely. In a word, you regulate. Emotionally, biologically, socially. And you don't do this through thought. You do it through breath, through vibration, through shared rhythm. This isn't just a psychological trick. It's a physiological recalibration. Group singing takes the chaos of individual bodies and aligns them. Heartbeat to heartbeat, breath to breath, brainwave to brainwave. It's like social homeostasis, a system built not through logic or planning, but sound. You feel this every time you lose yourself in a chant or harmony. You stop being I. You become we. And that state, that merged identity, is not just poetic, it's measurable. In MRI studies, group singing activates regions of the brain associated with reward, empathy, motor control, and self-other processing. It lights up the periaqueductal gray, an ancient midbrain region linked to vocalization and caregiving. It's the same system that evolved to help you care for a crying infant, now co-opted to care for a community. This is not coincidence. It's evolution. Because in your deep past, singing together wasn't optional. It was cohesion. It was the ritual that turned scattered individuals into tribes. The moment you sang together, your brain said, "They've trusted us." Even now, strangers who sing together trust each other more quickly. They cooperate more easily. They feel connected in ways that conversation alone can't create. This is why religious groups sing, why sports fans chant, why armies march to drum beats, why protesters link arms and raise voices. It's not about melody. It's about synchrony. Synchrony is the deepest language your brain understands. It says, "We are one." And when you achieve it with others, your body responds with a cocktail of reward. But here the trick. You don't need skill. You don't have to sing in tune. The benefits come from participation, not performance. You don't need to impress anyone. You just need to show up, to breathe, to blend. That's why communal singing has lasted when so many other rituals have disappeared. It's free, it's immediate, it's primal. And it still works, even if you're out of shape, or anxious, or lonely. Especially if you're lonely. Because group singing doesn't just feel like connection. It is connection at a cellular level. You've probably felt it without knowing what to call it. That rush during a stadium anthem. The lump in your throat during a memorial hymn. The unity of chanting with strangers for a cause you believe in. Your brain remembers. Your body remembers. Even if you haven't sung in years. Because the circuitry isn't gone, it's just dormant, waiting. Waiting for the right rhythm, the right group, the right song to wake it back up. And when it does, you are home. This is why people cry in choir rehearsals. Why songs make you shiver. Why harmonizing with someone you just met feels more intimate than hours of small talk. You're not just sharing music. You're sharing regulation. You're co-managing emotion, fear, grief, hope. You're not fixing each other. You're tuning each other. Like strings on the same instrument. This is why it matters that group singing still exists. In churches, in protests, in karaoke bars, in school gyms. Because in a world pulling people apart, this act stitches you back together. One voice at a time. This chapter is not just about nostalgia. It's about design. You were built for this. Built to regulate in rhythm, to remember in song, to merge into something larger when you needed it most. So when you sing with others today, whether in joy or protest or grief, you're not escaping the present. You're enacting something older than civilization, older than speech, a technology of the body, a ritual of the nervous system, a choir, yes, but also a cure, and maybe the only one we've ever truly had. Fire dies, stone cracks, language drifts and forgets itself. But the song remains. You've seen it across lifetimes, though you don't remember, not consciously, but in your cells, in the old wiring of your brain, you know this truth. Species rise and fall. Ice sheets grind continents. Cities collapse into myth. Tools rust. Tongues split, but music doesn't die. It moves. Like breath passed from mouth to mouth. Like rhythm that refuses silence. You've carried it with you through extinction. Not just metaphorically, literally. Your ancestors crossed continents with nothing but flint and fire and melody. They buried children with flutes. They carved rhythm into ritual. They sang long before they carved language into bone. And when cataclysm struck, when volcanoes dimmed the sun, when diseases erased villages, when predators prowled too close to see, what did you do? You sang. Not because it fixed the danger, but because it fixed you. Music doesn't protect you from death. It prepares you for it. It wraps fear in repetition. It gives grief a tempo. It gives the unbearable structure. That's why it lasted. That's why it still does. Even now, surrounded by machines and words and code, your music pulses beneath it all. You still sing when words aren't enough. At births, at weddings, at funerals, at revolutions. Why? Because nothing else gets in as deeply. No tool, no system, no script. You might forget how to build a radio, but you will not forget the tune your mother hummed in the dark. Music isn't just cultural, it's neurological continuity. When language degrades with age or illness, when Alzheimer's strips names and faces from the mind, music stays. Patients who cannot speak can still sing, still tap a beat, still weep at a melody they once danced to 60 years ago. Because it's stored differently, deeper, earlier. You didn't evolve music for pleasure. You evolved it for permanence. And that permanence has outlived even your cousins. The Neanderthals vanished. So did the Denisovans. Entire branches of humanity gone. But not their music. Not entirely. Because their rhythms became your rhythms. Their chants shaped your rituals. Their echoes linger in lullabies, in war songs, in the cadence of poetry you don't realize you're reciting. Every time you sing, you're breathing extinct voices back into the world. A soft resurrection. This is not nostalgia, it's paleoneurology. Studies suggest the neural structures that support music are older than those for language. The auditory cortex, the limbic system, the motor circuits linking sound to movement. Music didn't descend from speech. Speech likely descended from music. And that's why music survived. Because it was already old. Old enough to shape identity. old enough to bind tribe to tribe, old enough to comfort you through winters you thought would never end. Even now, you use it the same way. You press play when the world breaks. You hum when you're afraid. You dance when you don't know what else to do. In this, you're no different from the Ice Age humans who sang into caves that doubled as cathedrals, who beat rhythms into the earth to signal life to the sky, who carved bone flutes from the bodies of animals they'd killed and turned death into melody. And somehow, across all the endings, that melody continued. Through Babylon, through Black Plague, through burning cities and flooded islands, through slavery, through empire, through collapse. Music flowed around the fractures like water. It became resistance. It became remembering. It became survival, not just of the body but of meaning. And still it flows through you. You feel it in protest chants that shake glass and spine, in spirituals sung under a moonlit whip, in whispered lullabies passed down through trauma and tenacity. You feel it in your bones, even if your brain forgets. Because your nervous system doesn't need instructions to respond to music. It just does. A beat syncs your pulse. A minor key makes your eyes sting. A crescendo lifts your chest. These are not choices. They are inherited reactions, layered into you by millions of years of adaptation. So when people say music is universal, they're wrong. It's not universal. It's foundational. It is older than universality. It's the scaffolding beneath culture itself. What came before myth, before gods, before grammar? A rhythm, a hum, a note. You don't need to understand a culture's language to be moved by its song. That's the whole point. Music bypasses intellect. It targets the primal circuitry. It was there when words failed. It will be there when words fail again. Because they will. Your civilization, like all the others before it, will eventually fade. Your cities will erode. Your language will mutate, fracture, or vanish. Your tools will become relics. But somewhere, if the pattern holds, someone will still be singing. And that song will carry the echo of you. That's the quiet miracle of music. It outlasts. Because it doesn't live in monuments or texts, it lives in practice, in bodies, in breath. And breath continues. That's why cultures build their most sacred meaning around sound, not stone. Why indigenous maps are sung, not drawn. Why rituals are remembered as chants, not diagrams. Why knowledge survives longest when it's made musical. Because nothing endures like a melody passed from one throat to the next. No library needed. Just lungs. Just memory. Just will. And when the next world rises from the ruins of this one, music will still be there, sung by those who inherited the ache to remember what mattered. So when you sing, you are not just expressing yourself. You are time traveling. You are preserving. You are extending the life of something that refuses to die. And in a species that forgets almost everything it learns, that is a kind of immortality. The stars don't speak back. There are no wolves here, no wind, no trees to creak, no birds to signal dawn. Just the sterile hush of your pressurized dome and the soft hum of machines pretending to keep you alive. You're a space traveler now, alone on the Martian outpost. No sky you recognize, no voices, no tribe. And yet you hum. Not because you mean to, not because you're composing a song, but because silence has grown too thick. It presses against your skin, a weight your nervous system never evolved to carry. So your voice pushes back, just a vibration in your throat, a line of sound, a tether. It startles you at first, this instinct to make noise into nothing. You're not performing, no one's listening. And still you sing. Just a note, just enough to hear yourself. Because even now, in this age of machines and synthetic food and signal delay, your brain still believes what it always has. If no one hears you, you might not exist. So you sing to mark presence, to echo yourself back into being, to feel the walls push your voice back to you and say, yes, you are here. You are here. That's all your ancient brain wants to know. And singing is the proof. Because that sound, the one that comes from within, then leaves you, then returns, is the oldest call and response, the oldest ritual of being heard, even if only by yourself. You think it's strange until it is. Until you remember what happened to those before you, the ones left too long in isolation chambers on Earth, the ones in submarines, in caves, in silence, how their minds started folding inward, inventing voices, conjuring danger, whispering fears too deep to name. Because the brain is not built for wordless solitude. You are a social creature, wired to calibrate your reality against others, to mirror breath, to detect rhythm, to find comfort in sync. And when all that vanishes, you create it. Not with logic, not with equations, but with melody. This wasn't planned. No evolutionary engineer inserted music as a feature of future survival. It just remained. Long after weapons advanced, after language complexified, after civilization digitized, singing remained. As a placeholder, a lighthouse, a neurochemical beacon when everything else feels unreachable. Even now, on this red world that's never heard a lullaby, you find your lips forming one. Not because there's a child to soothe, but because there's a you to remember. And you know it, though maybe not consciously, that singing regulates your heartbeat, that it slows your breathing, that it increases oxytocin and lowers cortisol and lights up brain circuits that beg for human contact. So your melody becomes a companion, a conversation in the absence of other voices. In this dome you become the shaman and the listener, the choir and the cave, the mother and the child. You are call and response alone. And somehow that's enough. Because this impulse didn't form in laboratories or textbooks. It formed in firelit darkness, in frostbitten winters, in exiles and losses, and the unbearable space between one person and the next. The need to vocalize, to echo your being into the void, is not prehistoric. It's human. And it doesn't leave you, even when the planet does. even when you're not on Earth, even when no one is coming. Because sound, unlike language, is not dependent on meaning. It's dependent on feeling, on frequency, on presence. You don't need words, just vibration, just proof of life. You start to track the days not by clocks, but by songs. The hum you make when rationing water. The chant that forms as you strap yourself into the rover. The melody that drifts out when you lie beneath the ceiling, pretending it's a sky. It's not conscious, it's not even consistent, but it is yours. And maybe that's all singing ever was, a flag planted in the dark, a way to say, I'm here, I exist, I feel. Because even when food is secured, even when shelter is built, you are not truly safe unless you are connected. Not by radio, by resonance. You know this because the silence isn't quiet, it's suffocating. It magnifies thoughts, distorts time, and your hum cuts through it like light in fog. It doesn't fix the loneliness, but it holds it. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's always been enough. Long before Mars, long before rockets and domes and digital logs, when your ancestors stood at the edge of some vast and terrifying expanse of ice, of forest, of death, they sang. Not to change the landscape, but to be less alone inside it. And you here now continue the ritual. Not because it's useful, but because it's necessary. You hum in the greenhouse. You sing to the soil. You let your voice bounce off metal and synthetic glass and red dust that will never echo back. And still you do it. Because singing was never about being heard by others. It was about hearing yourself in a way that felt real. The Martian wind doesn't answer. The stars don't blink acknowledgement. But your voice still returns. And in that return, something ancient is satisfied. You may be alone, but you are not gone. Not while the song remains.